Welcome to Poirot's Mysteries. I'm your host, Poirot's Mysteries. Today we're diving into a brand new original tale inspired by the Queen of Crime herself, Agatha Christie. This is Sinister Mask of Rouen Market, a Hercule Poirot story set in the shadowy corners of 1920s France. Picture the bustling markets of Rouen, the opulent chateaux of Normandy, and a puzzle that will twist your little grey cells. Settle in, my friends. This is a long one, perfect for a cosy evening or a relaxing drive. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a mystery. And remember, tell me in the comments where you're listening from, London, Paris, or perhaps somewhere more exotic. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Château de la Masque. In the crisp autumn of 1925, the leaves of Normandy blazed with hues of amber and crimson, a vivid contrast to the undercurrents of intrigue that simmered beneath the surface of polite society. Hercule Poirot, the renowned Belgian detective whose impeccable moustache was matched only by his unparalleled intellect, found himself in Paris, savouring the last sips of a café au lait at a quaint establishment on the Rue de Rivoli. He had just resolved a trifling matter involving a stolen emerald necklace, a case of little consequence but sufficient to keep his little grey cells engaged. It was here, amid the clink of porcelain and the murmur of Parisian chatter, that a telegram arrived, its sharp edges hinting at urgency. Monsieur Poirot, it read in precise typed letters, your presence is urgently requested at Château de la Masque, near Rouen, for a weekend gathering. Matter of grave family importance. Absolute discretion assured. Signed, Baron Henri Duval. Poirot adjusted his pince-nez and stroked his moustache thoughtfully, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. Baron Henri Duval was a name familiar from the society pages, a textile magnate whose wealth was rivaled only by his passion for collecting antiquities. The Château de la Masque, perched on the verdant outskirts of Rouen, was whispered to house treasures from forgotten eras, including rare ceremonial masks said to carry the weight of history. But why summon a detective of Poirot's calibre under such vague pretences? The word urgent danced in his mind, and Poirot, who detested loose ends as much as an ill-tied cravat, resolved to accept the invitation. The journey from Paris to Rouen was a study in contrasts. The train, a gleaming marvel of steam and steel, wound through fields dotted with grazing cows, and past villages where church spires pierced the autumnal haze. Poirot, seated in a plush first-class compartment, allowed the rhythmic clatter of wheels to lull his thoughts. Rouen itself was a city of charm, its market square a riot of colour and sound, vendors hawking wheels of creamy camembert, bolts of fine linen, and curiosities from distant lands. The air carried the scent of freshly baked baguettes and the faint tang of the Seine. Yet Poirot's mind was elsewhere, already piecing together the puzzle of the Baron's summons. The chateau lay a short motor-car ride beyond Rouen, nestled among rolling hills and ancient oaks, whose branches formed a canopy over the winding drive. As the car crunched over gravel, Poirot noted the estate's grandeur, ivy-clad stone walls, turrets that seemed to whisper of medieval secrets, and windows that glinted like watchful eyes. At the entrance, Baron Henri Duval awaited, a tall, gaunt figure in his 50s, his sharp eyes betraying a nervous energy. His tailored suit was immaculate, but a slight twitch at the corner of his mouth suggested unease. Monsieur Poirot, your prompt arrival is a relief, the Baron said, extending a hand that trembled faintly. Welcome to Château de la Masque. Merci, Monsieur le Baron, Poirot replied, his voice smooth as velvet. Your telegram. It intrigues me. A matter of family importance, you say? The Baron nodded, ushering Poirot into the grand foyer. Marble floors gleamed under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, and the walls were adorned with tapestries depicting hunts and feasts from centuries past. A faint scent of lavender and old wood hung in the air. All in good time, the Baron said, his tone guarded. First, allow me to introduce you to the others. They entered a sunlit drawing room, its tall windows overlooking manicured gardens where roses still clung to life despite the autumn chill. The assembled guests turned as one, their expressions a mix of curiosity and wariness. Poirot's keen eyes catalogued each in turn. First, there was Lady Elise Duval, the Baron's wife, a striking woman of 40 with raven hair swept into an elegant chignon. Her emerald green dress accentuated her porcelain skin, but her eyes, sharp as cut glass, held a guarded intensity. She offered a cool nod, her fingers toying with a pearl necklace that caught the light. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice low and measured, I've read of your exploits, quite extraordinary. Next was Victor Duval, the Baron's only son, a handsome man of 25 with the careless charm of youth and wealth. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and his tailored jacket bore the faint creases of someone who preferred action to decorum. He lounged in an armchair, a glass of brandy in hand, his expression one of bored indifference. Father's always fussing about something, he muttered, barely glancing at Poirot. Seated beside Victor was Mademoiselle Claire Beaumont, the Baron's ward, a vivacious actress from Paris whose laughter bubbled like champagne. Her blonde curls framed a heart-shaped face, and her eyes sparkled with mischief. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, you must tell us how you solved that dreadful diamond theft," she exclaimed, clapping her hands. Orphaned as a child, Claire had been taken in by the Duvals, and her presence added a theatrical flair to the gathering. Dr. Armand Leclerc, the family physician, rose to greet Poirot with a warm handshake. A portly man in his late 40s, his round face was framed by spectacles that perched precariously on his nose. His manner was kindly, almost paternal, but his eyes darted nervously toward the Baron. "A pleasure, monsieur," he said. "Your reputation precedes you." Finally, there was Monsieur Jacques Moreau, the Baron's business partner, a shrewd merchant in his early 40s, with a perpetual frown etched into his angular features. He stood apart, checking a gold pocket watch, with an air of impatience. "I hope this isn't another of Henri's dramatics," he said curtly, his voice carrying the clipped precision of a man accustomed to numbers. The Baron cleared his throat, drawing attention. "Monsieur Poirot, I've invited you here under the guise of a social weekend, but the truth is far graver." The room fell silent, the only sound the distant ticking of a grandfather clock. "I fear for my life." A gasp escaped Claire, and Victor's glass paused midway to his lips. Lady Elise's fingers tightened on her pearls, while Dr. Leclerc adjusted his spectacles. Moreau's frown deepened. The Baron continued, his voice low. 3 weeks ago, I acquired a rare artifact from a vendor in Rouen's market, a ceremonial mask from the 16th century said to have been used in secret rituals. It's exquisite, but unsettling. Since its arrival, I've received threatening letters. Anonymous, of course. They speak of a curse, of retribution for sins of the Duval family. Poirot's eyes twinkled with interest. "A curse, you say? Most fascinating. May I see this mask?" The Baron led the group down a long corridor, its walls lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, whose eyes seemed to follow their steps. At the corridor's end was the Baron's study, a heavy oak door secured with a gleaming brass lock. He produced a key, and the door swung open to reveal a room of quiet opulence. Bookshelves lined one wall, a mahogany desk dominated the centre, and above it hung the mask. It was a grotesque visage of carved wood, painted in faded reds and blacks, its hollow eyes and twisted mouth evoking a primal unease. The craftsmanship was exquisite, yet the mask seemed to radiate menace, as if it held secrets older than the chateau itself. Poirot stepped closer, his head tilted. Magnifique, yet sinister. Where precisely in the Rouen market did you acquire it? From a vendor named Gaston, the Baron replied. A rough sort, but knowledgeable. He claimed it came from a private collection, though he was cagey about its origins. Poirot nodded, his mind already turning. And the letters? The Baron retrieved a small bundle from a locked drawer, each envelope bearing spidery handwriting. They arrived weekly, he said. Read them, if you wish. Poirot scanned the first. The mask sees all. Your sins will be judged. The others were similar, vague, yet menacing. He tucked them into his pocket for later study. As the group returned to the drawing room, the atmosphere grew heavy. Dinner was announced, and they moved to the dining hall, where candlelight danced on silverware and crystal. Conversation flowed uneasily. Victor complained of his father's tight purse strings, hinting at debts. Lady Elise spoke vaguely of marital tensions, her eyes avoiding her husband's. Claire flirted with Victor, her laughter a touch too bright. Dr. Leclerc discussed ailments with clinical detachment, and Moreau hinted at business disputes, his tone clipped. Poirot observed, his little grey cells humming. The Baron's fear was palpable, but so were the undercurrents among the guests, jealousy, greed, secrets. He sipped his wine, noting the way Lady Elise's hand lingered near Dr. Leclerc's, the way Victor's gaze darted to Claire, the way Moreau's watch ticked like a heartbeat. As the meal ended, a storm gathered outside, clouds rolling over the Norman hills. Rain began to patter against the windows, and the chateau seemed to hunker down, as if bracing for what was to come. Poirot retired to his room, a spacious chamber with a four-poster bed and a view of the darkened gardens. He sat at a small desk, the threatening letters spread before him, his mind sifting through details. The mask, the locked study, the guests' guarded glances. Little did he know, the night would bring not just rain, but blood. Chapter 2. The Shadow in the Night. The night of October 1925 cloaked Château de la Masque in a shroud of rain and thunder, the storm's fury rattling the ancient windows of the Norman estate. Hercule Poirot, ever vigilant despite his penchant for order, stirred in his guest room at a sound that pierced the gale, a cry sharp and fleeting, swallowed by the howling wind. It was just past midnight, and the chateau, with its creaking timbers and flickering lamps, seemed to hold its breath. Poirot, clad in a silk dressing-gown, adjusted his pince-nez and stepped into the corridor, his polished shoes silent on the Persian rug. The cry came again, now unmistakable, a woman's voice laced with terror. "Henri! Oh God, Henri!" it wailed, echoing from the direction of the Baron's study. Poirot's heart quickened, though his expression remained impassive. He moved swiftly, his small frame belying his urgency as doors along the corridor flung open. The household emerged in disarray, their faces pale in the dim glow of wall sconces. Lady Elise Duval stumbled forward, her nightgown askew, raven hair tumbling from its pins. Her eyes were wide with panic, her hands clutching the air as if to ward off an unseen horror. "Henri!" she gasped again, collapsing against the wall. Victor Duval, the Baron's son, appeared next, his dark hair tousled, eyes bleary from sleep, or perhaps the brandy from dinner. "Mother, what's happened?" he demanded, his voice sharp, with alarm. Mademoiselle Claire Beaumont, the Baron's ward, emerged in a silk robe, her blonde curls framing a face drained of its usual vivacity. "What's going on?" she whispered, clutching Victor's arm. Dr. Armand Leclerc, the family physician, bustled forward, his medical bag already in hand, spectacles fogging in the chilly air. "Stay calm, everyone," he urged, though his own voice trembled. Monsieur Jacques Moreau, the Baron's business partner, was the last to appear, his angular face set in a frown, oddly alert for the hour. He adjusted his cufflinks, a gesture that struck Poirot as peculiarly composed. The group converged on the Baron's study, its heavy oak door looming at the corridor's end. Lady Elise pounded on it, her fists frantic. "Henri, open the door!" Silence answered, save for the storm's relentless drumming. Victor joined her, his broad shoulders straining as he pushed against the unyielding wood. "Father, are you there?" Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but commanding. "Non, mes amis, do not force it yet. We must preserve the scene. The door, it is locked." He examined the brass keyhole, noting the key still inside, glinting faintly. The windows, visible through the corridor's end, were bolted shut, their panes streaked with rain. No sign of forced entry, no splintered wood, no disturbed hinges. Dr. Leclerc, ever practical, suggested, "We must break it down. He may need help." But Poirot's sharp gaze silenced him. "Patience, doctor. We call the butler. He may have a spare key." The butler, a stooped man named Pierre, arrived moments later, his face ashen. He confirmed no spare existed. The Baron kept the only key. With no alternative, Victor and Pierre heaved against the door, the wood groaning before splintering at the lock. The door swung open, and a collective gasp filled the air. The study, lit by a single flickering lamp, revealed a scene of horror. Baron Henri Duval lay slumped over his mahogany desk, his body rigid, his face obscured by the sinister mask from Rouen market. The grotesque visage, with its hollow eyes and twisted mouth painted in faded reds and blacks, was clamped tightly over his features, as if mocking the living. A dagger protruded from his chest, its silver hilt gleaming in the lamplight, blood pooling on the antique rug beneath. The room was otherwise pristine. No overturned chairs, no scattered papers, no footprints on the polished floor. Dr. Leclerc rushed forward, kneeling beside the body. His fingers probed for a pulse, then withdrew. "He's dead," he said, voice hollow. "Stabbed through the heart. But how?" He gestured to the room's sealed state. "The door was locked from the inside, the windows bolted. It's impossible." Poirot stepped forward, his eyes scanning every detail with surgical precision. The mask, fastened with an intricate clasp, seemed placed with care, likely after death, for no man could endure such a wound, and then don it. On the desk lay a half-written letter in the Baron's hand. "To my dear Elise, forgive me for—" The words trailed off, ink smudged as if the pen had fallen. The dagger, its blade wiped clean, bore no fingerprints. A faint scent of cigar smoke lingered, though the Baron was not known to smoke. Lady Elise sank into a chair, sobbing, as Victor supported her. "Who could do this?" she cried. Claire clung to Victor, her eyes wide with fear. "It's that cursed mask," she whispered. Moreau stood apart, his frown deepening, while Dr. Leclerc busied himself examining the body, muttering about rigor mortis. Poirot's voice cut through the chaos. "This is murder, most foul, and an impossible one, it seems, A locked room, a man dead, a killer vanished like smoke. But I, Hercule Poirot, declare that no crime is impossible to solve. The truth lies in the details, and I shall find it." The storm delayed the local police, and it was not until dawn that Inspector Giraud arrived, his moustache bristling with indignation at Poirot's presence. "A Belgian meddling in French affairs," he grumbled, but Poirot ignored him, focusing on the scene. He questioned Pierre, who confirmed the Baron had retired to his study at 11 p.m., locking the door as was his habit. No one had seen him since. Poirot's inquiries revealed tensions. Lady Elise admitted to a heated argument with the Baron over his obsession with the mask, hinting at marital discord. "He was distant, consumed by that thing," she said, her pearls clicking nervously. Victor confessed his father had threatened to cut his allowance, citing reckless spending. "But I'd never harm him," he insisted, though his eyes darted away. Claire revealed the Baron opposed her engagement to Victor, calling her a fortune hunter. "He was kind but controlling," she said, tears welling. Dr. Leclerc admitted to prescribing a sedative for the Baron's headaches, administered at 10:30 p.m., which could have dulled his senses. Moreau, curt as ever, spoke of a business dispute, accusations of embezzlement that the Baron had levelled against him. "All lies," he snapped, checking his watch. Poirot examined the room further. A muddy footprint near the window caught his eye, though the bolts remained secure. A torn scrap of fabric, fine silk, lay under the desk, perhaps from a sleeve. The mask's clasp required 2 hands to fasten, suggesting deliberation. A faint scratch on the window frame hinted at tampering, yet the storm's mud made external entry unlikely. The threatening letters still in Poirot's pocket mentioned the mask's curse. Superstition, he thought, but a convenient distraction. As dawn broke, the household gathered in the drawing-room, their faces etched with shock and suspicion. Inspector Giraud blustered about fingerprints and alibis, but Poirot's mind was elsewhere, sifting through motives. Lady Elise's desire for freedom, Victor's need for money, Claire's thwarted love, Leclerc's possible medical error, Moreau's financial secrets. The Rouen market vendor Gaston was a new lead, a man with a grudge against the Duvals for past dealings, according to Pierre. Was he a red herring, or a key to the puzzle? The storm's aftermath left the chateau isolated, the telephone lines down, forcing Poirot to rely on his wits. He requested tea, his calm demeanour a stark contrast to the household's panic. As he sipped, he observed the guests' interactions. Lady Elise's fleeting glance at Dr. Leclerc, Victor's protective arm around Claire, Moreau's restless pacing. The mask, now removed from the Baron's face and placed on the desk, seemed to watch them all, its hollow eyes accusing. "This crime," Poirot murmured to himself, "is a performance, and the stage is set for deception." He resolved to interrogate each suspect, to unravel the web of lies that bound them. The locked room was no barrier to a killer's cunning, nor to Poirot's genius. Chapter 3. The Web of Suspicions. Dawn crept over the Norman hills, painting the Château de la Masque in hues of gold and shadow, but no light could dispel the pall of death that hung over the estate. The storm had passed, leaving puddles on the gravel drive and a lingering chill in the air. Hercule Poirot, fortified by a steaming café au lait, served in the chateau's elegant dining hall, sat at a polished table, his sharp eyes observing the subdued guests. The murder of Baron Henri Duval, found stabbed in his locked study with the sinister mask from Rouen market clamped over his face, had shaken the household. The impossible nature of the crime, a sealed room, no apparent entry or exit, only deepened the mystery. Poirot, with his impeccable moustache and even more impeccable mind, was determined to unravel it. The local police, led by the blustering Inspector Giraud, had arrived at first light, their boots tracking mud across the marble foyer. Giraud, with his pomaded hair and air of self-importance, dismissed Poirot's presence with a sneer. "This is a French matter, Monsieur Poirot. Leave it to professionals." Poirot merely smiled, his eyes twinkling. "The little grey cells, Inspector, know no borders. I shall assist, whether you wish it or not." Ignoring Giraud's protests, Poirot began his investigation in earnest, choosing the chateau's library as his base. The room was a sanctuary of knowledge, its walls lined with leather-bound tomes and heavy drapes that muted the morning sun. A faint scent of cigar smoke lingered, though Poirot noted no ashtrays. Curious, given the Baron's aversion to tobacco. He arranged for each suspect to be interviewed here, one by one, to probe their stories and sift truth from deception. First was Lady Elise Duval, the Baron's widow, her raven hair now neatly pinned, but her eyes red-rimmed from grief or perhaps guilt. She sat across from Poirot, her emerald-green dress a stark contrast to her pallor. "Monsieur Poirot," she began, her voice low, "Henri and I, we were not always in harmony. He was consumed by his collections, especially that wretched mask, but I swear I could not harm him." She admitted to slipping out during the storm for a walk in the gardens, claiming the rain soothed her nerves. "I was alone," she said, her fingers twisting her pearl necklace, one bead noticeably missing. Motive: freedom from a controlling marriage, and perhaps the vast Duval fortune. Poirot nodded, his face unreadable. "And this walk, madame, at what hour?" "After dinner, perhaps 10 p.m., she replied, hesitating. "I returned before the cry was heard." No one could confirm her whereabouts, a fact Poirot filed away. Next came Victor Duval, the Baron's son, his handsome features marred by a scowl. He paced the library, his tailored jacket creased from a sleepless night. "Father was impossible," he admitted, running a hand through his dark hair. "Always lecturing me about money, threatening to cut my allowance. Said I was wasting my life on cards and horses." He claimed to have been in his room, reading when the cry awoke him. "Murder? Preposterous! I'd gain nothing by it. His debts outweigh the estate." Yet his cigarette case, engraved with his initials, bore fresh scratches, as if used to pry something open. Motive: resentment and financial desperation. Mademoiselle Claire Beaumont entered with a nervous smile, her blonde curls catching the light. The actress's usual vivacity was subdued, her hands fidgeting with the sash of her robe. "The Baron treated me like a daughter," she said, her voice soft. "But he was strict. He forbade my engagement to Victor, called me a gold digger." She claimed to have been asleep, alone, at the time of the murder. Her diary, glimpsed on her bedside table, hinted at desperate plans to elope. Could she have acted to secure her future? Motive: love and the promise of wealth through Victor. Dr. Armand Leclerc, the family physician, settled heavily into the chair, his spectacles glinting. "I saw the Baron at 10:30 p.m., he said, adjusting his tie. "He complained of headaches, so I gave him a mild sedative, nothing strong, mind you." He claimed to have retired afterward, his room near the study. Poirot noted the doctor's medical bag contained not only sedatives, but a vial of potassium cyanide, labelled for pest control. "Rats in the cellar," Leclerc explained, but his eyes darted away. Motive: perhaps concealing a medical misstep, or something deeper tied to the family. Finally, Monsieur Jacques Moreau, the Baron's business partner, sat stiffly, his angular face set in a perpetual frown. He checked his gold pocket watch, which Poirot noticed had stopped at 11:45 p.m., the estimated time of death. A faulty spring, Moreau muttered. He admitted to a falling out with the Baron over business dealings. Henri accused me of skimming. Profits, utter nonsense. I was in bed when it happened. His alibi was as flimsy as the others, and his calm demeanour during the night's chaos struck Poirot as calculated. Motive, financial disputes, and the threat of exposure. Between interviews, Poirot explored the study again, with Giraud's reluctant permission. The room remained as it was, the Baron's body removed, but the blood-stained rug, the half-written letter, "To my dear Elise, forgive me for..." and the sinister mask on the desk untouched. The muddy footprint near the window intrigued him. Too small for a man's boot, yet the window was bolted from within. The scrap of silk fabric under the desk matched Lady Elise's gown, but she claimed it tore earlier in the evening. The dagger, wiped clean, bore no distinguishing marks, but its hilt matched a set in the chateau's display case, accessible only to family. Poirot ventured outside, the damp grass squelching under his polished shoes. The window's exterior showed a faint scratch on the bolt, as if tampered with. But the storm's mud would have left tracks. None were found. He questioned Pierre, the butler, who mentioned overhearing whispers near the mask's display case days before, though he couldn't identify the voices. A lead to the Rouen market vendor Gaston emerged. A man with a weathered face and a grudge against the Duvals, who had once outbid him on a rare textile deal. He cursed the Baron's name, Pierre recalled. A red herring, or a piece of the puzzle. Back in the library, Poirot sifted through the threatening letters from the Baron's desk. Their spidery script was identical, each warning of the mask's curse. The eyes see your sins. He suspected forgery, too theatrical, designed to mislead. But by whom? The cigar smoke lingered in his mind. Moreau smoked, but only in private, and Victor's cigarette case suggested a habit. A clue, or another distraction. As noon approached, the household gathered for a tense lunch in the dining hall. Accusations simmered beneath forced pleasantries. Lady Elise snapped at Victor for his reckless ways, while Claire's hand lingered on Victor's. Earning a sharp glance from Dr. Leclerc. Moreau excused himself early, citing business papers, but Poirot caught him slipping a note into his pocket. Giraud, blundering about, fixated on fingerprints, but Poirot dismissed him. It is the psychology, mon ami, not the smudges, that reveals the killer. Poirot staged a small experiment, locking himself in the study to test the room's security. He tugged at the window bolts, secure. He examined the keyhole, noting a faint scratch, as if a tool had manipulated the key. The mask's clasp, intricate and heavy, required dexterity to fasten, suggesting the killer had time and access. A hidden passage, perhaps? He tapped the bookshelves, but found only solid wood. The dumbwaiter in the corner, used for delivering meals, was too small for a person, but could conceal a tool or a clue. The day wore on, and tensions rose. Claire whispered to Victor, her face pale. Lady Elise retired with a headache, escorted by Dr. Leclerc. Moreau vanished to his room, claiming fatigue. Poirot, undeterred, sketched a mental map of motives and alibis, each suspect a thread in a tangled web. The locked room, the mask, the dagger, all pointed to a meticulously planned crime, yet the killer's method remained elusive. As evening loomed, Poirot stood by the study window, gazing at the Rouen hills. The truth, he murmured, hides in the shadows of what seems impossible. But I, Hercule Poirot, shall bring it to light. Chapter 4. Veils of Deception. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Château de la Masque, its golden rays doing little to warm the chill that had settled over the Norman estate. The murder of Baron Henri Duval, stabbed in his locked study, the grotesque mask from Rouen market fixed over his lifeless face, had left the household in a state of uneasy suspicion. Hercule Poirot, his keen mind as sharp as his impeccably groomed moustache, stood in the chateau's library, surrounded by the scent of old leather and lingering cigar smoke. The impossible crime, a sealed room, no trace of entry or exit, demanded answers, and Poirot was determined to peel back the layers of deceit that shrouded the truth. Inspector Giraud, the local police chief, bustled about the study, barking orders to his men about fingerprints and timelines, but Poirot dismissed his efforts with a subtle shake of his head. "It is not the smudges, Inspector, but the motives that reveal the killer," he murmured, his eyes scanning the room for overlooked details. The blood-stained rug, the half-written letter, "To my dear Elise, forgive me for—" and the sinister mask on the desk remained as they were, each a piece of the puzzle. The muddy footprint near the window, the scrap of silk fabric, the scratched keyhole, all whispered of a careful plan, but the method eluded him. Poirot returned to the library, where he had interviewed the suspects earlier that morning. The five, Lady Elise Duval, Victor Duval, Claire Beaumont, Dr. Armand Leclerc, and Jacques Moreau, each carried motives as tangled as the ivy outside. To deepen his understanding, Poirot requested the chateau's blueprints from Pierre, the butler, who produced a dusty roll of paper from the archives. The plans revealed no obvious secret passages, but a narrow dumbwaiter shaft connected the study to the kitchen below. Too small for a person, Poirot noted, but perhaps large enough for a weapon or a tool. He filed the thought away. His next move was to revisit the clues. Poirot examined the silk scrap found under the desk, its fine weave matching Lady Elise's gown. She had claimed it tore during dinner, but the tear's clean edge suggested otherwise. He pocketed it, then turned to the muddy footprint by the window. It was small, almost feminine, yet the window's bolt was secure, the exterior frame showing only a faint scratch. Could someone have climbed the ivy-covered wall? The storm's mud would have left tracks, yet the lawn was pristine. A red herring, perhaps, designed to mislead. Poirot's attention shifted to the mask's display case in the corridor, where the dagger had originated. The case was locked, accessible only to the family, but Pierre mentioned a spare key kept in the butler's pantry. When Poirot inspected it, the key was missing. "Curieux," he muttered, his mind turning to the whispers Pierre had overheard near the case days before. Who had access? Who had motive? To test his theories, Poirot gathered the suspects in the drawing room for a subtle provocation. "Mes amis," he began, his voice calm but piercing, "the killer is among us. The mask, the dagger, the locked room, all point to a mind both cunning and desperate. I invite you to share any observations you may have overlooked." His eyes swept the room, noting each reaction. Lady Elise stiffened, her fingers clutching her pearls. "I've told you everything," she said sharply. "I was in the gardens, alone." But her eyes flicked to Dr. Leclerc, a fleeting glance that Poirot caught. Victor, slouched in an armchair, scoffed. "This is absurd. Father had enemies, yes, but not in this house." His cigarette case, scratched and dented, lay on the table, its marks suggesting more than a careless fall. Claire, pale and trembling, clung to Victor's arm. "It's that curse," she whispered. "The mask brought this upon us." Dr. Leclerc adjusted his spectacles, his voice steady. "I gave the Baron a sedative, nothing more. I was in my room." Yet his medical bag left in the library contained that curious vial of cyanide, unexplained beyond rats. Moreau, checking his stopped watch, snapped, "This is a waste of time. I was asleep, as I said." His calm demeanour, however, seemed forced, his hands restless. Poirot's provocation yielded a new clue. As the group dispersed, he noticed a torn piece of paper caught in the drawing-room's fireplace, partially burned. Retrieving it with tongs, he deciphered fragments of handwriting. "Must act soon. The mask hides." It resembled the threatening letters, but the ink was fresher, the script less practiced. Forged, perhaps, but by whom? Victor's desk held similar paper, but so did Moreau's briefcase. Another layer of deception. Poirot ventured to the Rouen market, a short drive away, to trace the mask's origins. The market square bustled with vendors, their stalls laden with cheeses, linens, and trinkets. Gaston, the vendor who sold the mask, was a grizzled man with a scar across his cheek, his eyes narrowing at Poirot's questions. The mask? Old, very old. Came from a collector in Lyon. Cursed, they say, brings death to those who own it. He spat on the ground, muttering about the Duval's greed. They cheated me years ago, outbid me on a deal, good riddance to Henri. His grudge was clear, but his alibi, serving customers all evening, was solid, confirmed by a neighbouring vendor. A dead end, or a deliberate distraction? Back at the chateau, Poirot examined Victor's cigarette case more closely, noting the scratches matched the window frame's marks. A tool, perhaps, he mused. Victor claimed it was damaged in a fall, but his evasive glance suggested otherwise. Claire's diary, glimpsed during a discreet search of her room, revealed frantic entries about eloping with Victor and fears of the Baron's disapproval. "He'll ruin us," one page read. A motive, but no proof of murder. Dr. Leclerc's medical bag yielded another clue. A syringe, empty but smelling faintly of sedative. Could the Baron have been drugged beyond the admitted dose, rendering him helpless? Leclerc's explanation, for emergencies, was plausible but vague. Meanwhile, Moreau's stopped watch intrigued Poirot. Why had it stopped at 11:45 p.m., the approximate time of death? A coincidence, Moreau insisted, but his fingers tightened around the watch, betraying unease. Poirot staged a reconstruction in the study, locking himself inside to test the room's mechanics. He tugged the window bolts, immovable. He examined the dumbwaiter, finding a faint smudge of oil, as if recently used. The keyhole scratch suggested manipulation, perhaps with a wire to pull the key back after locking from the outside. But how had the killer entered? The mask's clasp, requiring 2 hands, implied the killer lingered, yet no traces remained. Poirot's mind churned, considering a staged scene. Was the Baron killed elsewhere and moved? Unlikely, given the blood spread. A servant's offhand remark added another thread. "The Baron was odd lately," she said, polishing silver in the pantry. "Kept muttering about the mask watching him." Superstition, or a clue to his state of mind? The missing display case key nagged at Poirot. Someone had planned this meticulously. As dusk settled, tensions flared at dinner. Victor accused Moreau of shady dealings, while Lady Elise snapped at Claire for throwing herself at Victor. Dr. Leclerc remained silent, but his hand brushed Elise's, unnoticed by all but Poirot. The web of alliances and animosities grew clearer, yet the killer's method remained shrouded. Poirot retired to the library, spreading the threatening letters before him. The burned fragment suggested a plot within a plot. someone orchestrating fear. The mask, the locked room, the dagger, all pointed to a theatrical crime designed to confuse. "The killer hides behind a veil," Poirot whispered, "but I shall lift it." Chapter 5. Storms Within and Without. As evening draped its velvet cloak over Chateau de la Masque, another storm gathered in the Norman skies, its low rumble echoing the unrest within the ancient walls. The murder of Baron Henri Duval, stabbed in his locked study, the sinister mask from Rouen market fixed over his lifeless face, had cast a pall of suspicion over the household. Hercule Poirot, his keen intellect as polished as his patent leather shoes, stood in the chateau's library, surrounded by the musty scent of old books, and the faint trace of cigar smoke that seemed to haunt the air. The impossible crime, a sealed room, no trace of entry or exit, had deepened with each clue, from the muddy footprint to the torn silk scrap, yet the killer's method remained elusive. Now new complications and twists threatened to unravel the delicate threads of Poirot's investigation. The day had been one of relentless probing. Poirot's interviews and explorations had revealed motives among the 5 suspects: Lady Elise Duval's desire for freedom from a controlling marriage, Victor Duval's financial desperation, Claire Beaumont's thwarted love for Victor, Dr. Armand Leclerc's potential medical misstep, and Jacques Moreau's business disputes. The clues: a scratched cigarette case, a missing display case key, a burned note fragment, pointed to a theatrical crime. But the locked room defied logic. Poirot's little grey cells hummed, sensing the killer was growing bold, perhaps desperate. In the late afternoon, Poirot gathered the household in the drawing room, its tall windows rattling under the approaching storm's gusts. The chandelier cast flickering shadows, mirroring the unease among the guests. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice steady but laced with purpose. "The killer walks among us, hiding behind a mask of innocence, but truths, they begin to emerge. I have found evidence." He paused, holding up the partially burned note from the fireplace, its fragments reading, "Must act soon. The mask hides." Gasps rippled through the room. Lady Elise's hand flew to her throat, her pearls clicking. "What does it mean?" she demanded, her voice sharp. Victor's eyes narrowed, his fingers tightening on his scratched cigarette case. Claire clung to Victor, her face pale, while Dr. Leclerc adjusted his spectacles, his expression unreadable. Moreau, checking his stopped watch, snapped, "This is nonsense! A prank, nothing more!" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "No, monsieur. This note, it is no prank. It is a thread in the web of deception, and there is more." He produced a second find, a duplicate key to the study's display case, discovered hidden in a vase in Claire's room during a discreet search. Claire gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "I've never seen that!" she cried. "Someone must have placed it there." The room erupted in accusations. Victor rounded on Claire. "You were always sneaking around Father's study." Claire's eyes welled with tears. "I loved him like a father. I'd never—" Lady Elise's gaze darted to Dr. Leclerc, who remained silent, his fingers twitching. Moreau stood apart, his frown deepening. "This is a distraction," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Poirot raised a hand for silence. "The key. It suggests access to the dagger. But who hid it and why? The truth, it is close." His words were a calculated prod, designed to unsettle the killer. As the group dispersed, tempers frayed, Poirot noted new tensions. Victor's protective stance toward Claire, Lady Elise's whispered exchange with Leclerc, Moreau's hurried exit to his room. A startling revelation came at dinner. served in the dining hall under the storm's growing roar. Lady Elise, her composure cracking, admitted to an affair with Dr. Leclerc. Henri knew, she confessed, her voice trembling. He threatened to disinherit me. Leclerc nodded, his face flushed. It's true, but we meant no harm. We plan to leave after the weekend. The admission shifted motives. Had Elise and Leclerc conspired to eliminate the Baron's control? Poirot's eyes narrowed, cataloguing their reactions. Claire, emboldened by the tension, revealed another twist. I saw Monsieur Moreau arguing with the Baron in the study 2 nights ago, she said, her voice quavering. It was about money, something about missing funds. Moreau's head snapped up. Lies! I discussed business, nothing more. But his stopped watch, stuck at 11:45 p.m., the time of death, suggested he was near the study that night. Poirot's mind raced. Was Moreau's calm a facade? A new complication arose when Poirot returned to the study, inspecting the dumbwaiter shaft he'd noted earlier. The faint oil smudge had a chemical scent, not kitchen grease, perhaps from a mechanical device. He found a tiny spring, barely visible, caught in the shaft's edge. A trap mechanism? Unlikely, but it hinted at ingenuity. The window's scratched bolt, still secure, nagged at him. Had the killer tampered with it earlier, only to stage the locked room? The evening took a darker turn when Poirot's tea, served in the library, tasted bitter. Suspecting foul play, he spat it out, his heart pounding. A quick test with a litmus strip from Leclerc's bag confirmed poison cyanide, matching the vial in the doctor's possession. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, the killer grows reckless. He summoned the household, revealing the attempt on his life. Someone wishes to silence Hercule Poirot, he declared, his voice icy. But I am not so easily dispatched. Panic ensued. Lady Elise fainted, revived by Leclerc's quick ministrations. Victor accused Moreau, who countered with a jab at Claire's scheming ways. Claire, in tears, fled to her room. Poirot observed, noting Leclerc's calm under pressure. Too calm? The poison attempt suggested the killer feared Poirot's progress, but who had access to his tea? The kitchen staff swore no one entered after it was prepared, yet the cup had been left unattended in the library. A search of Moreau's room, conducted, with Giraud's grudging approval, yielded a ledger with coded entries. Evidence of embezzlement? Moreau claimed it was private accounting, but his stopped watch, now ticking again, suggested he'd tampered with it to feign an alibi. Victor's room held a hidden bottle of sedative, stronger than Leclerc's prescription, raising questions about his role in the Baron's vulnerability. Claire's diary revealed a cryptic note. V says we must act or lose everything. Was Victor plotting beyond his debts? Lady Elise's room offered another clue. A letter, half-drafted, begging Leclerc to end this nightmare. A confession or a plea for escape? Leclerc's bag, re-examined, held a second syringe, its needle bent as if used forcibly. Each clue deepened the tangle, yet the locked room's secret remained. Poirot staged another experiment, locking himself in the study with Pierre's assistance. He tested the keyhole, sliding a wire through to manipulate the key. A possible method, but time-consuming. The mask's clasp, requiring dexterity, suggested the killer had lingered, unafraid of discovery. A chilling thought struck. Had the Baron been alive when the mask was placed? Or was it a post-mortem flourish to invoke the curse? As midnight approached, the storm broke, rain lashing the windows. Poirot stood in the corridor, gazing at the mask's empty display case. The missing key, the burned note, the poison attempt, all pointed to a desperate killer. The storm within, he murmured, is greater than the one without. The truth, it is near. Chapter 6. The Unmasking. The storm had retreated from Château de la Masque, leaving a heavy silence over the Norman estate. But the air within its ancient walls crackled with tension. The murder of Baron Henri Duval, stabbed in his locked study, the grotesque mask from Rouen market clamped over his lifeless face, had woven a tapestry of suspicion among the household. Hercule Poirot, his impeccable moustache framing a face of calm determination, stood in the dimly lit study, the sinister mask resting on the mahogany desk like an accusing spectre. The impossible crime, a sealed room, no trace of entry or exit, had confounded all but Poirot, whose little grey cells now hummed with clarity. Clues had mounted. A muddy footprint, a torn silk scrap, a burned note, a duplicate key, a poisoned teacup. The killer's desperation was palpable, and Poirot was ready to lay bare the truth. The evening was young, the chateau's chandeliers casting a soft glow over the drawing-room where Poirot gathered the 5 suspects: Lady Elise Duval, Victor Duval, Claire Beaumont, Dr. Armand Leclerc, and Jacques Moreau. The atmosphere was taut, each face a mask of its own: grief, fear, or defiance. Inspector Giraud, the blustering French policeman, stood by the door, his arms crossed, begrudgingly allowing Poirot to take the lead. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice steady but piercing, "tonight we unmask a murderer. The crime, it seemed impossible. A locked room, a dagger, a sinister mask, but no crime defies Hercule Poirot. The truth, it is here, in the details." He paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking on the parquet floor. "Let us reconstruct. The Baron was stabbed, the mask placed upon his face, the room locked from within. How? A secret passage? No, the blueprints show none. A trick with the window. The bolts were secure, the mud outside untouched. A device, perhaps." He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. Lady Elise clutched her pearls. Victor's hand hovered near his scratched cigarette case. Claire's fingers trembled. Leclerc's spectacles glinted, and Moreau's stopped watch gleamed in his pocket. Poirot held up the burned note fragment from the fireplace. "This note? Must act soon. The mask hides." It suggested a plot, but it was a forgery designed to mislead. He produced the threatening letters from the Baron's desk, their spidery script identical. These, too, were crafted to invoke the mask's curse. But by whom? His gaze lingered on Victor, whose jaw tightened. "Monsieur Victor, your desk held paper matching this note. Did you write it to scare your father? To secure your inheritance?" Victor leapt to his feet. "Absurd! I'd never—" Claire gripped his arm, her eyes pleading. Poirot waved him down. "Patience, monsieur. We explore all possibilities." He turned to the duplicate key found in Claire's room. "This key, Mademoiselle Beaumont, opened the display case containing the dagger. You claimed it was planted. Possible, but convenient." Claire's voice cracked. "I swear, I didn't touch it." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, but noted her diary's cryptic entry. "V says we must act." Next, he addressed Lady Elise and Dr. Leclerc. "Madame, your affair with the good doctor was a secret the Baron knew. He threatened to disinherit you. And you, doctor, your syringe, bent perhaps from use, could have delivered more than a sedative." Elise gasped, her face paling. Leclerc adjusted his spectacles. "Preposterous! My syringe was for emergencies, nothing more." Yet the cyanide vial in his bag loomed large, especially after the poisoned tea attempt on Poirot. Finally, Poirot faced Moreau. "Monsieur Moreau, your watch stopped at 11:45 p.m., the time of death. A coincidence, or were you near the study settling your dispute over missing funds? Moreau's frown deepened. My watch broke. I was asleep. But his coded ledger, found in his room, hinted at embezzlement, a motive for murder. Poirot stepped to the centre of the room, holding the mask aloft. This mask, it is the key. Not cursed, no, but a symbol. The killer used it to distract, to stage a scene of superstition. But how was the locked room breached? He recounted his experiments. The keyhole's scratch suggested a wire to pull the key back, but the timing was tight. The dumbwaiter's oil smudge and tiny spring hinted at a mechanical trick, yet no device was found. The window's bolt, scratched but secure, pointed to tampering, perhaps earlier, to stage the illusion. A sudden inspiration struck. Consider, mes amis, a simpler truth. The Baron was not killed in the study. Gasps filled the room. Poirot continued. He was stabbed elsewhere, perhaps the corridor, then moved to the study. The mask was placed to suggest a ritual, the door locked with the duplicate key. But how to move a body undetected? He revealed a new clue. A faint bloodstain, overlooked by Giraud, on the corridor rug, covered by a hastily shifted vase. The killer dragged the Baron, staging the scene. The muddy footprint, a distraction planted with mud from the garden, the silk scrap, torn deliberately to implicate Madame Elise. Poirot's voice grew firm. The killer is Monsieur Jacques Moreau. Moreau's face drained of colour. Nonsense, he spat, but Poirot pressed on. You climbed the ivy outside the study window, loosening the bolt days before. You entered, stabbed the Baron in the corridor, moved him to the study, and placed the mask. You exited via the window, using a string to pull the bolt back, creating the illusion of a locked room. Your watch stopped not by chance, but because you used it to time your climb. Its mechanism jarred. Moreau laughed, a hollow sound. Prove it, Belgian! Poirot produced a strand of ivy, caught in Moreau's cuff, and a smudge of window polish on his jacket. The ledger in your room confirms embezzlement. The Baron confronted you, and you acted to silence him. But a twist emerged. Claire, trembling, stood. It wasn't just him, she whispered. Victor, he helped. Victor's face contorted. Claire, no! Poirot's eyes widened, then narrowed. Mademoiselle, explain. Claire's voice broke. Victor forged the letters to scare his father, hoping he'd sell the mask and pay his debts. But Moreau, he took it further. Victor slumped, defeated. I didn't know he'd kill him, he muttered. Poirot nodded. You were complicit, monsieur, but not the killer. Moreau acted alone in the act of murder. Giraud, stunned, ordered Moreau's arrest. The businessman lunged for the door, but Giraud's men seized him. Poirot continued. The poison in my tea. Moreau's final attempt to stop me, using cyanide from Leclerc's bag, accessed during dinner. Leclerc paled, but Poirot waved a hand. You, doctor, are guilty only of indiscretion with Madame Elise. The room fell silent, the mask's hollow eyes seeming to dim. Poirot concluded, the locked room was no mystery, only a clever illusion. The truth lies in human greed and desperation. Order and method, mes amis, have prevailed. Chapter 7. Justice Served. The air in Château de la Masque hung heavy with the weight of truth revealed, as though the ancient stones themselves exhaled a sigh of relief. The storm that had battered the Norman estate had passed, leaving a sky streaked with the soft pinks and golds of dawn. Hercule Poirot, his impeccable moustache as pristine as his resolve, stood in the château's grand foyer, where the marble floors gleamed under the morning light, filtering through tall windows. The murder of Baron Henri Duval, stabbed in his locked study, the sinister mask from Rouen market clamped over his lifeless face, had been solved. Jacques Moreau, the Baron's business partner, stood revealed as the killer, his cunning plot to stage an impossible crime undone by Poirot's relentless logic. Yet, the ripples of the crime lingered, and the task of justice remained. The drawing room, where Poirot had unmasked Moreau the previous evening, was now a scene of quiet aftermath. Inspector Giraud, his bluster subdued by Poirot's triumph, oversaw the handcuffed Moreau, whose angular face was set in a mask of defiance. The other suspects, Lady Elise Duval, Victor Duval, Claire Beaumont and Dr. Armand Leclerc, gathered in a semicircle, their expressions a mix of relief, guilt, and lingering shock. The sinister mask, its hollow eyes no longer accusing, rested in a crate destined for police evidence. Poirot, standing near the fireplace, adjusted his pince-nez and addressed the room, his voice calm but resonant. "Mes amis," he began, "the crime is solved, the killer apprehended. But justice, it is not merely the capture of the guilty, it is the restoration of order. Let us reflect on the truths we have uncovered." His eyes swept over the group, noting each reaction. Lady Elise's trembling hands, Victor's slumped shoulders, Claire's tear-streaked face, Leclerc's uneasy gaze. Poirot recounted the case with precision. Monsieur Moreau, driven by greed and fear of exposure, killed the Baron to conceal his embezzlement. He climbed the ivy to the study window, loosening the bolt days prior to create the illusion of a locked room. He stabbed the Baron in the corridor, moved the body, and placed the mask to invoke a curse, a distraction from his true motive. The burned note, the duplicate key, the poisoned tea, all were his attempts to mislead and silence. Moreau, his wrists bound, sneered. "You've no proof, Belgian. It's all conjecture." Poirot raised a hand, producing the strand of ivy from Moreau's cuff, and the smudged window polish from his jacket. "These, monsieur, are not conjecture, nor is your ledger, which details funds siphoned from the Duval Empire. The Baron confronted you, and you acted." Giraud, grudgingly impressed, nodded as his men prepared to escort Moreau to Rouen police station. Poirot turned to Victor, whose complicity had been a shocking twist. "Monsieur Victor, you forged the threatening letters hoping to scare your father into selling the mask to ease your debts. You did not kill, but your actions set the stage for tragedy." Victor's head bowed, his voice barely audible. "I never meant for this, I just needed the money." Claire, beside him, squeezed his hand, her eyes pleading forgiveness. Poirot's gaze softened. "Youth and desperation are poor counselors, but you are not beyond redemption." Lady Elise, her raven hair framing a face etched with sorrow, spoke next. "Monsieur Poirot, you've exposed my shame, my affair with Armand." She glanced at Dr. Leclerc, who stood rigidly. "But we are innocent of murder." Poirot nodded. "Oui, madame. Your indiscretions, they were not criminal, though they wounded the Baron. The silk scrap planted by Moreau was meant to implicate you." Leclerc adjusted his spectacles, relief flickering in his eyes. "The cyanide in my bag," he said. "I swear, it was for pests, not poison." Poirot inclined his head. "I believe you, doctor, but carelessness with such substances is unwise." Claire, her vivacity dimmed, spoke softly. "I betrayed Victor's trust by revealing his role, but I couldn't let Moreau escape justice." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Mademoiselle, your courage has aided the truth. The key in your room, another of Moreau's tricks, was meant to cast suspicion on you." With the household secrets laid bare, Poirot addressed the mask's fate. This object, it is no more cursed than a painting or a vase. Its power was in the fear it inspired, exploited by a killer. He recommended its destruction, a suggestion Giraud noted with a grunt. Evidence first, then we'll see, the inspector muttered, though his respect for Poirot had grown. As Moreau was led away, the chateau seemed to breathe easier. Lady Elise announced plans to sell the estate, its memories too heavy. "I'll start anew, perhaps in Paris," she said, her voice steadier. Leclerc offered to accompany her, their affair now an open path. Victor and Claire, reconciled, spoke of a quieter life, free from the Baron's shadow. "We'll marry," Claire whispered, "and leave this place behind." Victor nodded, his debts a burden he vowed to face honestly. Poirot, satisfied, prepared to depart. He strolled the chateau's gardens, where the roses, battered by the storm, showed signs of resilience. Pierre, the butler, approached with a letter from the Rouen market vendor, Gaston, who admitted selling the mask with tales of a curse to inflate its price. "A swindler's trick," Pierre said, shaking his head. Poirot smiled. "Superstition is a powerful tool, but it crumbles before logic." In the foyer, Giraud offered a reluctant handshake. "You've done well, Poirot, though I'll never admit it publicly." Poirot chuckled. "Order and method, mon ami, triumph over bluster." He boarded a motor car to Rouen station, the chateau receding behind him. Its turrets silhouetted against the dawn. As the train to Paris hummed along, Poirot reflected on the case. The locked room, the mask, the motives, all had been threads in a tapestry of human frailty. Greed had driven Moreau, desperation Victor, love and fear Elise and Leclerc. Yet justice, as Poirot saw it, was not merely punishment, but understanding. The Baron's death, tragic though it was, had freed the household from its own chains. He opened his notebook, sketching a final note. The sinister mask of Rouen Market, solved. The true mask is that which we wear to hide our hearts. Closing it, he leaned back, the rhythmic clatter of the train, a soothing counterpoint to his thoughts. The little grey cells, for now, could rest. Chapter 8. Reflections in the Seine. The morning sun bathed Rouen in a golden haze, its rays glinting off the Seine's rippling surface as Hercule Poirot strolled through the city's historic market square. The Château de la Masque, where Baron Henri Duval had met his end, stabbed in a locked study, the sinister mask from this very market fixed over his face, lay behind him, both in distance and in the resolution of its grim mystery. Jacques Moreau, the Baron's business partner, had been unmasked as the killer, his motive rooted in embezzlement and fear of exposure. Victor Duval's complicity in forging threatening letters had been revealed, while Lady Elise, Dr. Armand Leclerc, and Claire Beaumont emerged innocent, though not unscathed by their own secrets. The case was closed, yet Poirot, ever the seeker of order, felt the tug of lingering threads. The little grey cells, never fully at rest, urged him to reflect. The market bustled with life, vendors calling out their wares, wheels of creamy camembert, bolts of fine linen, and curiosities from distant lands. The air carried the scent of fresh baguettes and the faint tang of river water, a stark contrast to the chateau's oppressive air. Poirot paused at a stall piled with antiques, his polished shoes tapping lightly on the cobblestones. The vendor, a wiry man with a weathered face, was none other than Gaston, who had sold the Baron the sinister mask. His scar gleamed in the sunlight as he eyed Poirot warily. "Monsieur Poirot," Gaston said, his voice gruff, "heard you caught the devil who killed Duval. Good riddance, I say." He spat into the dust, a gesture Poirot noted with mild distaste. "That mask brought nothing but trouble." Poirot tilted his head, his pince-nez catching the light. "The mask, monsieur, was but a tool. You told the Baron it was cursed, a clever tale to inflate its price, n'est-ce pas?" Gaston's eyes narrowed, but he nodded. "Aye, a story to sell. Old that mask from a Lyon collector. Said it was used in rituals centuries back. I spun the curse to make it exotic. Didn't think it'd lead to murder." Poirot's lips curved slightly. "Superstition is a spark, Monsieur Gaston, but greed lit the fire. Tell me, did others inquire about the mask?" Gaston hesitated, then admitted a woman had asked about it days before the Baron's purchase. A woman with dark hair, elegant, speaking with a refined accent. "Didn't give her name," he said, shrugging. "Seemed desperate, though." Poirot's mind flashed to Lady Elise, her raven hair and guarded demeanour. A coincidence, or a forgotten thread? Leaving the market, Poirot wandered to the Seine's edge, where willows dipped their branches into the water. He sat on a bench, his notebook open, sketching thoughts. The case had been a tapestry of motives. Moreau's embezzlement, Victor's debts, Elise's affair with Leclerc, Claire's love for Victor. The locked room with its staged clues, the muddy footprint, the silk scrap, the burned note, had been Moreau's attempt to mislead. Yet Gaston's revelation nagged at him. Had Elise known of the mask before its purchase? Had she planted the seed of fear in the Baron's mind? Returning to the chateau for a final farewell, Poirot found the household in transition. Lady Elise, her emerald green dress replaced by sombre black, was overseeing the packing of crates in the foyer. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady but weary, "you've given us peace, though it's a bitter kind. I'm selling the chateau. Too many ghosts." She admitted plans to move to Paris with Dr. Leclerc, their affair now an open path. "Henri's death freed me, but I wish it hadn't been so." Poirot noted her missing pearl necklace, replaced by a simple locket. "A keepsake," she said, touching it, "from happier times." Victor and Claire, arm in arm, approached. Victor's face, once petulant, bore a new resolve. "I've settled my debts," he said, his voice firm. "Sold my horses, my car. Claire and I will start fresh, perhaps in London." Claire's eyes, no longer tearful, sparkled with hope. "We'll marry soon," she said. "No more secrets." Poirot nodded, approving their sincerity, but his mind lingered on Victor's forged letters. Had his actions been merely financial? Or had he known more of Moreau's plans? Dr. Leclerc, packing his medical bag, offered a sheepish smile. "I've learned caution, Monsieur Poirot. No more cyanide in my kit." His affair with Elise, though scandalous, had been no crime, and Poirot sensed his relief at escaping suspicion. The butler, Pierre, hovered nearby, his loyalty to the Duvals unwavering. "The mask's gone to the police," he said. "Good riddance." Poirot agreed, though he wondered if its destruction would truly end its shadow. A letter arrived from Inspector Giraud, grudgingly confirming Moreau's confession. "He admits the embezzlement," Giraud wrote, "and the murder to cover it. The ivy climb, the window trick, all as you said." But Giraud noted a detail. Moreau claimed an accomplice had suggested the mask's curse, though he refused to name them. Poirot's brow furrowed. Victor, Elise, or someone outside the chateau? Seeking clarity, Poirot visited the Rouen police station, where Moreau awaited transfer to Paris. Stark cell. The businessman's defiance had crumbled, his angular face haggard. "You won, Poirot," he muttered, but I wasn't alone in hating Henri. Others whispered of curses, pushed me to act. He clammed up, leaving Poirot with more questions. The accomplice, real or a final deflection? Back at the Seine, Poirot reflected on the case's echoes. The mask, a relic of rituals, had been a prop in a modern tragedy. The locked room, with its clever bolt trick, was no match for logic. The motives, greed, love, desperation, were timeless, as was justice. He recalled the burned note or the mask hides, the duplicate key, the poisoned tea. Each had pointed to Moreau, yet the woman at the market lingered in his mind. Elise? A stranger? The thread remained loose, but Poirot accepted that not every question needed an answer. As he boarded the train to Paris, the chateau fading into the distance, Poirot closed his notebook. "The case is closed," he murmured, "but the human heart remains a mystery." The Seine's reflections danced outside, a mirror to his thoughts. Justice had been served, the guilty punished, the innocent freed. The mask's curse, a fabrication, had no power over truth. Chapter 9. Hidden Alliances. The golden light of a Parisian afternoon spilled through the windows of Hercule Poirot's modest apartment on the Rue de Rivoli, where the scent of fresh coffee mingled with the faint perfume of polished wood. The case of the sinister mask of Rouen Market was, to all appearances, closed. Jacques Moreau, the Baron Henri Duval's business partner, had been arrested for the murder, stabbed in a locked study, the grotesque mask from Rouen Market fixed over the Baron's lifeless face. The locked room mystery, with its tangled clues of a muddy footprint, a torn silk scrap, a burned note, and a poisoned teacup, had been unravelled by Poirot's relentless logic. Moreau's motive, embezzlement and fear of exposure, had been laid bare, with Victor Duval's complicity in forging threatening letters adding a bitter twist. Lady Elise Duval, Dr. Armand Leclerc and Claire Beaumont had been cleared, their secrets of affairs and love exposed but innocent of murder. Yet, as Poirot sipped his café au lait, his little grey cells stirred, unsettled by a lingering shadow. The mysterious woman Gaston, the market vendor had mentioned, who inquired about the mask before its purchase. Poirot sat at his desk, his notebook open, its pages filled with meticulous notes on the case. The woman, described as elegant, dark-haired, with a refined accent, had piqued his curiosity. Could it be Lady Elise, whose raven hair and poised demeanour matched the description? Or was it an outsider, an unseen player in the chateau's drama? Moreau's cryptic claim of an accomplice, unnamed in his confession, gnawed at him. "The truth," Poirot murmured, "is like a tapestry. Pull one thread, and the pattern shifts." Determined to hold to Niang's system, tie up loose ends, Poirot returned to Rouen, seeking answers. The bustling market square greeted him, its vendors and cobblestones unchanged since his last visit. He found Gaston at his stall, polishing a brass candlestick. The vendor's scarred face lit up with recognition. "Back so soon, Monsieur Poirot?" he asked, wary. "I seek clarity, Monsieur Gaston," Poirot replied, his tone smooth but probing. "The woman who inquired about the mask, describe her again." Gaston repeated his account. Dark hair, elegant, a refined accent, perhaps 40, with a nervous air. "She offered a high price, but vanished when I refused," he added. Poirot's mind raced. Lady Elise fit, yet her alibi held, and no evidence tied her to the mask's purchase. Poirot visited the Rouen police station, where Giraud, now less hostile, shared Moreau's latest statement. "He insists someone urged him to use the mask's curse as cover," Giraud said. "Won't name them." Poirot's eyes narrowed. An accomplice or a deflection? He requested access to Moreau's ledger, its coded entries hinting at a second party. Initials LV appeared repeatedly. Elise or someone else? Back in Paris, Poirot contacted a local informant, a discreet archivist named Madame Dubois, who specialized in society records. Over tea at a quaint café, she revealed a startling fact. The Duval had a distant cousin, Louise Vasseur, a dark-haired widow in her 40s, known for her elegance and bitterness over a past family slight. Louise had been in Rouen the week of the murder, staying at a discreet inn. Poirot's heart quickened. Could she be the mysterious woman? Tracking Louise to a Paris townhouse, Poirot found her poised but guarded. "Monsieur Poirot, to what do I owe this visit?" she asked, her accent refined, her dark hair swept into a chignon. He probed delicately, mentioning the mask. Her composure faltered. "I sought it for its historical value," she admitted. "Henri outbid me, as always." She denied any role in the murder, claiming she left Rouen after losing the bid. Her alibi was thin, but no evidence linked her directly. Poirot's investigation uncovered a letter in Louise's handwriting, found among the Baron's papers, begging him to sell the mask to her. "It belongs in our family," it read. Had she incited Moreau, planting the curse idea to pressure the Baron? Poirot confronted her again. Louise's eyes flashed. "I despised Henri, but I'm no killer." She admitted suggesting the curse tale to Gaston, hoping to scare Henri into selling. "Moreau overheard," she confessed. "He twisted it." Poirot pieced it together. Louise's resentment fueled Moreau's plan, but she was no murderer, merely a catalyst. He returned to his apartment, satisfied. The mask's shadow was lifted, its final secret revealed. Louise faced no charges, but her role as an unwitting spark was noted in Poirot's final report to Jäger Giraud. Chapter 10. The Final Twist. The Parisian twilight cast a gentle glow over the Rue de Rivoli, where Hercule Poirot sat in his modest apartment, the scent of polished wood and fresh coffee mingling in the air. The case of the sinister mask of Rouen Market had reached its conclusion, or so it seemed. Baron Henri Duval's murder, stabbed in his locked study at Château de la Masque, the grotesque mask from Rouen Market fixed over his lifeless face, had been solved. Jacques Moreau, the Baron's business partner, was behind bars, his embezzlement motive exposed through Poirot's meticulous unravelling of clues. A muddy footprint, a torn silk scrap, a burned note, a duplicate key, a poisoned teacup. Victor Duval's complicity in forging threatening letters had been revealed, while Lady Elise Duval, Dr. Armand Leclerc, and Claire Beaumont emerged innocent, their secrets of love and betrayal laid bare. The mysterious woman from the market, Louise Vasseur, had been identified as an unwitting catalyst, her suggestion of a curse exploited by Moreau. Yet, as Poirot gazed out at the city's twinkling lights, his little grey cells stirred, sensing one final twist in the tapestry of truth. Poirot's desk was orderly, his notebook open to a page titled The Sinister Mask Resolution. The case had been a masterpiece of deception. Moreau's staged locked room, achieved by loosening a window bolt and climbing the ivy, had nearly fooled even him. The mask, a relic from a lion collector, had been no more cursed than a common trinket, its mystique a tool for misdirection. Yet, a letter delivered that morning, postmarked from Rouen, lay unopened beside his coffee cup. Its elegant script bore the initials E.D., Lady Elise Duval. Poirot's curiosity, ever his guide, prompted him to break the seal. "My dear Monsieur Poirot," the letter began, "your genius has brought justice to our troubled house, but I owe you the full truth. There is a secret I have kept, not out of guilt but shame. I beg you read this in confidence." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his heart quickening. He read on, the words painting a picture that shifted the case's final contours. Elise confessed that the Baron, in the months before his death, had orchestrated a scheme to inflate the value of his antiquities collection for insurance purposes. The threatening letters, though forged by Victor to pressure his father, were inspired by Henri himself, who spread rumours of the mask's curse to drive up its perceived worth. He planned to stage a theft, Elise wrote, to claim a fortune and settle our debts. I opposed it, fearing it would ruin us, but he was resolute. She revealed that Henri had hired Gaston, the market vendor, to bolster the curse narrative, paying him handsomely to spread tales of the mask's dark history. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. Mon Dieu, he murmured, the Baron himself wove the first thread of deception. This letter continued. Elise had overheard Henri and Moreau arguing not about embezzlement, but about the scheme's risks. Moreau, already siphoning funds, saw an opportunity. I suspect Jacques used Henri's plan to mask his own crime, Elise wrote. I kept silent, fearing my knowledge would implicate me. The revelation cast the case in a new light. The Baron's scheme explained the forged letter's origin. Victor's actions a misguided echo of his father's deceit. Moreau, cunning and opportunistic, had twisted the curse narrative to cover his murder, staging the locked room to deflect suspicion. Louise Vasseur's role, suggesting the curse to Gaston, was an unwitting spark in a fire Henri himself had kindled. Poirot resolved to verify Elise's claims. He telephoned Inspector Giraud, who confirmed that Gaston, under pressure, admitted receiving payments from the Baron to spread the curse story. A swindler's game, Giraud grunted, but no crime in itself. Poirot then contacted Madame Dubois, his archivist informant, who unearthed insurance documents listing the mask at an inflated value, signed by Henri weeks before his death. The pieces fit. Henri's greed had sown the seeds of his own demise. Yet Poirot wondered about Elise's silence. Had she suspected Moreau's intent and failed to act? He penned a discreet reply, urging her to share her knowledge with Giraud, assuring her that her role as a bystander bore no legal weight. The truth, madame, he wrote, frees the soul as well as the law. Elise's response, arriving the next day, expressed gratitude and a promise to cooperate fully. Poirot revisited his notes tracing the case's arc. The locked room with its loosened bolt and ivy climb was Moreau's masterstroke, undone by the strand of ivy in his cuff and the polish on his jacket. The burned note, the duplicate key, the poisoned tea, all were Moreau's desperate ploys, countered by Poirot's logic. Victor's forged letters, inspired by Henri's scheme, had muddied the waters, while Claire's revelation and Louise's unwitting role clarified them. Elise and Leclerc's affair, though scandalous, was irrelevant to the crime, their innocence a testament to Poirot's precision. As evening fell, Poirot strolled along the Seine, its waters reflecting Paris's lights like a mirror of truth. The chateau's shadows, greed, betrayal, desperation had been dispelled, but Henri's role as architect of his own fate added a tragic note. Poirot paused by a bridge, his reflection wavering in the current. The human heart, he mused, weaves its own masks more sinister than any relic. He returned to his apartment, archiving the case in a leather-bound file labelled Château de la Masque, 1925. The mask, now in police custody, would likely be destroyed, its curse a footnote in Rouen's history. The Duvals, freed from its shadow, faced new beginnings. Elise and Leclerc in Paris, Victor and Claire planning a modest wedding, their debts settled through honest means. Moreau faced trial, his fate sealed by evidence and confession. Poirot sipped a final coffee, closing his notebook. The final twist, he murmured, is that truth, like the Seine, flows ever onward. The case, with its layers of deception, was a triumph of order and method. He smiled, his little grey cells at peace, ready for the next mystery.